It's the most popular F word in Washington, fraud. And DOGE, the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, has been tearing through federal agencies on the hunt for it. But is DOGE looking in the right places? The fraud we'll tell you about tonight is complex, pervasive, and being carried out by transnational criminal organizations, often using stolen identities to target U.S. taxpayers, costing the government hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
The story will continue in a moment.
To be honest, Elon Musk coming out and saying, there is a huge amount of fraud, I welcome that message completely because finally someone is actually saying this.
No one knows the ins and outs of government fraud better than Linda Miller. She spent a decade at the Government Accountability Office, tracking how taxpayer money is spent and misspent, and even wrote the rule book on preventing fraud in federal programs.
Fraud is willful deception. It involves willful deception, and it has to be proven in a court of law.
Is DOGE conflating fraud with wasteful spending?
Yes, often. You may not agree with what USAID does. You may not want to be investing American dollars in, foreign fertilizer, for example. You may think that's the wrong thing to be spending money on, but that's not fraud.
Last year, the Government Accountability Office released a report estimating the federal government loses as much as $521 billion a year to fraud. But Miller and other fraud experts believe the number is higher.
I believe the government is losing between $550 billion and about $750 billion a year. We're coming up close to the $1 trillion amount is lost every year to fraud.
When most people think of government fraud, I imagine they're thinking somebody is claiming disability benefits when they're not actually eligible, somebody collecting food stamps when they're not actually eligible. Are those the biggest offenders?
Not at all, not by a long shot. What we're really talking about is nation-state actors. We're talking about organized crime rings. We're talking about using vast amounts of stolen Americans' identities to monetize them for, criminal activity.
The problem exploded during the pandemic when the government rushed trillions of dollars into the economy to help struggling Americans. Applications for relief programs moved online, making it easier for people to access aid. But with few safeguards, scammers, hackers, and organized crime rings also cashed in.
Fraud prevention is simply not a priority for federal and state agencies.
In 2020, Miller was appointed to an independent watchdog committee that tracked how COVID relief money was spent.
So we could tell right away, it's like, oh, well, that's all going to get stolen.
You saw it coming.
Oh, yeah. It was like they threw money in the air and just let people run around and grab it. The most egregious part is that a lot of the people who stole that money were foreign adversarial nation states.
So who are they? Who are you talking about?
We're talking about China. We're talking about Russia.
Impersonating Americans in a lot of cases.
Right.
These are arguably digital gangs in the 21st century that are built off of having safe haven status, meaning their governments are not going to interrupt their activity even if it's illegal.
Brian Vorndran is head of the FBI's cyber division. He says these digital gangs are armed with a very important weapon. Is it true that the Social Security number of just about every single American is available for sale on the dark web?
That is a true statement. All of our personally identifiable information, name, date of birth, form of addresses, Social Security number is available on the darknet and can likely be purchased.
That's chilling.
Yeah, it's very much a way of our lives, though, right now.
And purchased, I hear, for as little as $2 a piece.
Yep, very affordable.
Last year, the FBI unraveled one of the largest digital fraud cases in U.S. history, in which cybercriminals from around the world used stolen identities to pocket $6 billion in pandemic unemployment funds.
$6 billion is an enormous, enormous amount of money.
Why is the government a target for this type of fraud?
Because of the massive amount of money that exists in the federal government and in the state government.
There's no official tally of how much COVID relief money was lost to fraud, but Miller estimates it's more than $1 trillion. That's $1 in $5, making it the largest fraud loss in U.S. history.
One of the things I've found really disheartening is since then I've talked to some folks who said, well, that was just the pandemic. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
Was it?
No. I mean, it's whack-a-mole, and these guys are paying close attention. They're seeing where better controls are being put in place, and then they're going to where the controls still haven't been improved.
What are the hotspots for fraud right now?
Disaster funding is a really big issue. When a disaster happens in the country, the fraud actors see where it's coming. They look at the zip codes, and they begin buying stolen identities so that they can begin applying for disaster loans, disaster grants on behalf of stolen identities.
That's our FEMA stuff.
The real Americans behind those identities, people like Rich and Deanne Wilkin, who survived the Los Angeles wildfires that tore through their Palisades neighborhood in January.
Everything on this side burned, and the school on the other side also burned.
They documented the devastation, showing the home they lived in for nearly 50 years gone. All they have left are the few carloads of belongings they managed to take with them. The Wilkins applied for disaster assistance from FEMA, carefully keeping a file and notebook with important information they'd need throughout the process. So as far as you know, you've done everything you need to do. Help is on the way.
Help is on the way.
But help never came. So the Wilkins followed up with a FEMA representative at a disaster center and learned the personal information they'd used to set up their FEMA account had been changed.
She says, what's your social security number? Okay, what's your date of birth? Okay, and your address is such and such. And I said, no. Is your phone number start with area code such and such? And I said, no.
What's going through your mind?
Yikes.
Yeah, WTF.
Oh, and by that time, too, we had already heard some of our other friends whose accounts were the same way, and we just go, oh, not us too.
The Wilkins were told their account was locked due to suspected identity fraud. They've spent months waiting for FEMA to resolve their case, and it's unclear whether they will ever get any money. Where will you be in 6 months?
Here.
Will you still have this folder in front of you?
Okay.
Hopefully it's been put way in the back of the filing cabinet.
It's not just one program. Where there's money, there's fraud. In unemployment, food stamps, disability, tax refunds, leaving Americans struggling to access what they're owed. All the while, criminals are one step ahead, using AI tools like deepfakes, often of innocent people, to cover their tracks.
Hi, can you confirm your name?
The man you see here is attempting to pass an identity check through the company ID.me to obtain a tax refund from the IRS. Or so it appears. Watch closely as he holds up a driver's license. There's a glitch, and you see a sliver of a different man's face.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to complete your verification.
You can hear someone speaking Mandarin in the background. In some cases, suspected criminals are on the payroll of foreign governments, like China, which employs a group the FBI calls APT-41, APT for Advanced Persistent Threat. In 2021, APT-41 carried out a highly sophisticated and unusual hack of at least 6 state governments. What would they want hacking into state government programs?
They just want to make money for themselves.
Through the U.S. government?
Correct.
Via American taxpayer dollars?
Correct. They used stolen, personally identifiable information and essentially created fraudulent unemployment claims, and then those proceeds were laundered through shell companies, and that money was sent back to these individuals in China.
How much did they get?
Our best estimate is $60 million.
$60 million? Over the course of how long?
Over the course of about 2 years.
Wow. How much of that has been recovered?
Very little. Very little.
And I assume never will be.
That's a likely outcome.
And to be clear, this was money that was supposed to go to Americans in need in a crime being carried out that has been linked to the Chinese government.
Correct.
Multiple law enforcement and national security officials told us China is a top destination for stolen taxpayer dollars. But the schemes are so complex and difficult to investigate, the true losses are unknown. We've heard that attacks like this are continuing to this day, and it's not just APT-41. There are hundreds of people involved. Do you believe that to be true?
I believe that there are sustained campaigns across this globe that are very well resourced with a goal of causing damage to the United States.
Can you really catch a criminal in this arena that is operating in a place like China, Russia, North Korea, Eastern Europe?
We have plenty of examples where we have caught people from some of the countries that you mentioned.
I do think there's a perception, though, that some of these criminals are untouchable. They're impossible to get to.
Sure, I would agree with that.
It also, respectfully, sounds like you're outnumbered.
In the U.S. government, we're all outnumbered.
Do you ever feel like you're sort of screaming until you're blue in the face on this and no one is listening to you?
Yes, yes. I have worked with agencies where when I sit down and talk to them, they say, I'm going to stop you right there because you keep saying fraud. And that sounds so insidious. Is there another word we could use? And
Is there?
Well, I say, well, what's the word you'd prefer? And they say, maybe misappropriation.
Does that make it better?
Yeah, it sounds better. And, and what I usually say is, it is insidious.
It's been brought to light that the fraud, not just waste and abuse, the fraud has been incredible.
DOGE claims it has saved taxpayers more than $160 billion so far, sometimes citing examples of cost cuts that are inaccurate and later walked back. A White House spokesman told us DOGE has been working on improving data sharing between agencies and that departments are collaborating to identify fraud and prevent criminals from exploiting taxpayers, saying, quote, fraudsters will be held accountable. Watching DOGE, are you optimistic that real fraud reform will actually come?
When I watch DOGE today, I do see some hints that they are addressing the right issues. But right now, I think the jury is still out on whether or not we're going to get that kind of progress.
Do you feel like you have to choose your words carefully when you're talking about DOGE and Elon Musk?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I really think fraud is not a political issue. This is mom and apple pie stuff. We all agree that bad actors should not be stealing American taxpayer dollars. But now it's become political. People like me and people in the law enforcement community, we see the adversary not as Republicans or Democrats, but as foreign adversarial nation states and organized crime rings. And I believe that there's opportunities for DOGE to save a lot of significant money if they focus on the right things, if they focus on real fraud.